Watercolor is my favorite medium. It's underrated because it looks scary, which, okay, fair. But it's very easy to get started with. Takes a bit of getting used to. I put together 8 essential tips to help you learn how to use watercolor and master it. All the do's and don'ts, so you don't have to learn the hard way like I did. Well, without further ado, let's do this. Okay, number 1, make sure you learn the 2 key techniques. Wet on wet and wet on dry. Okay, forget dry for now. It's really just painting. It's just the paintbrush touching the paper. You've probably done it before without even realizing. But make sure you spend a lot of time to figure out the wet on wet technique. That is a game changer. And it will be different on each type of paper. Simply wet the page with clean water and add some paint on top. This is the technique that watercolor is known for. You can see we're adding blue, green, yellow, red all together, and it automatically blends. With watercolor, the technique is super simple. You can see there's a little bit in the background, but when you use the wet on dry technique like this, everything is in focus. Perfect for this movie painting, but if you want to get that watercolor look, that's where the wet on wet technique comes in. All of these beautiful blends that look fuzzy, the obvious blooms here. Watercolor is the best medium for this. And you really don't have to try. You wet the page, add paint on top, and just leave it to dry. But it can be tricky, it can pull on the paper. So make sure you spend some time to really figure out this technique. But there is another, dry brushing, perfect for C. There's a place for every single technique, so do make sure you practice them. Number 2, don't rush to control the paint. Watercolor is a very different medium to something like acrylics or color pencils. Once it dries, it could look like a completely different piece. This is another big part of the wet on wet technique. You can see all we need to do is just move that paint slightly, and there are no harsh edges, but that can be tricky to master. You can see in these weird little watercolor heads that it doesn't matter what color is down, each color blends into the other. That's the wet on wet technique. But if you spend a long while trying to blend all these colors together, certain areas can actually dry. That's where you get the harsh lines, the harsh edges, and it can look overworked. Watercolor is most beautiful when you just leave the paint on the water to do its thing. Get it roughly in the right location and then just leave it be. But if you try to control the paint for too long, you can actually make the piece worse. You can see this pumpkin dress has quite harsh edges, and a lot of the highlights have been covered up. It's actually really easy to overwork a piece in watercolor. Just leave it be, let it dry and see what happens. Something that would have blended nicely isn't going to if you keep altering the paint. When I create these loose flowy portraits like this, the second the paint dries just a little bit too much, you're gonna get a harsh line. And also you can see the cheeks are so dark at this point because we have lost the highlights. So add the water, add the paint, and then just take a step back and see what happens. That way when you next go to add paint, it will be a little bit more controlled because the surface isn't as wet. If you're adding something detailed like the center of an eye, it's better to wait until the right moment so it doesn't spread too much on the water. Watercolor is a very different medium in this sense. You don't want to make it look messy. Just take a step back, take a breather, and place that paint in very particular areas. It's better than overworking the piece. Number 3, remember the ratios. With watercolor, there is a fine line between mixing what's already down and adding a water bloom, whether intended or not. And this is especially easier when you're painting on a dark color. If you've got a little bit more water on the brush like this and go to add it to your painting, at first it doesn't look like much of a big deal. But once that painting dries, you're going to get blooms. There are pros and cons to this. If you're creating in a loose, flowy way like this, the blooms actually really work. And if you can figure out this technique, whether it will come across as paint or bloom, you can get some beautiful blooms in your pieces. It is a controversial technique. This bloom here under the chin was not planned. It doesn't look great. These ones in the corner though are beautiful. That's the thing about blooms. You really don't know what you're gonna create. So many times I've gone to add water to a painting and it's not actually done it. The paper you're using can be a huge factor to this. It is controversial. A lot of people really don't like blooms. I personally do. Painting this little frog here, you can see there's not many highlights, so you can actually add water to try to recreate those highlights. Sometimes it will appear as a big bloom, and other times it will be softer depending on the paper you're using. It's all about knowing whether you're introducing more water that's already down or not. This is something you can only figure out by using the same paint and paintbrushes over and over again and really getting a grasp of the medium. Tip number 4, deepen those shadows. If you're painting a piece and feel like it's lacking depth, add a thin shadow layer on top. It could be blue, it could be purple, it could be green, any color really, except yellow. And that will bring life to a piece. This is especially noticeable on portraits and landscapes. And if you're painting a portrait and it's looking a little bit flat, chances are it needs more color. Looking at these pieces that we're painting outside, you can see they're both lacking depth. Sometimes if you're creating quickly, this is the first thing to go. But look at the difference when those shadows are added. Purples and blues, the richer tones. It really makes it pop off the page. Even using monochrome, you can see the difference the yellow makes, not being a deep enough color. These portraits are looking a little bit flat, especially when compared with this one. It's a lot easier to see values in a monochrome piece, but even using color, this painting here from Peachtober is really lacking something. You can see by darkening those colors and shadows every time, the painting ends up a lot more dramatic. Sometimes that might not be the look that you're going for, but if you're not happy with a piece, why don't you try to deepen those shadows? Make sure you have the highlights, midtones, and shadows. And once all of those are represented, you might find it actually brings life to your painting. Keep a tissue handy so you can dab it away if you're not super happy with certain areas. With watercolor, just because you're going darker doesn't mean it has to stick. It's super easy to reverse. Number 5, don't forget to plan your highlights in advance before the paint even touches the paper. The key to a good watercolor painting is having a range of highlights, midtones, and shadows. If you don't leave gaps for the highlights, you're going to lose them. White paint is an option, but it's usually optimal to see the paper through the paint instead. You can see on this piece we lost a lot of highlights. This cat went terribly wrong. You can see in the eyes especially, in this fur. And this piece here, which I love, is lacking some lovely bright highlights. Also with trees and landscapes, animals, you've got to remember to factor in that light. Especially if you're painting something like clouds. You need the white of the paper to show through. And if there's an area that you know you would like to have bright, it's best to just leave that area white. Or dab it with a tissue whilst it's wet to regain the highlight. Unfortunately with watercolor, once it's dry, there's not a lot you can do. You could either try to add more water and lift it, or you might have to switch it up, use something like acrylics on top. Number 6, experiment with your colours. This is a unique medium in that it's very accessible. You don't need a ton of colours. And yet, with the colours you have, you can blend so many more shades than even like an alcohol marker set. Using just these 4 colours, look how much we can create. Some of these colours I don't even know what colour they are. And this painting here for the Scene series was only created using 3 colours. All of these unique muted tones were created using a limited colour palette. With watercolour, you can use them unconventionally. You can use them with portraits. Colours you would never normally reach for. It opens up brand new opportunities because in owning just a handful of colours, you can mix a whole range. Just put 2 colours together on your palette. You can even add it on the page with water like this, and they just blend. They just mix together. Plus, it's not like you're having to add a medium or something like that. Watercolour uses water anyway, so it's really not difficult, and you end up with these muted, unique tones that could be quite expensive to buy from a tube anyway. You can mix colours you didn't even realise you wanted. limited. So make the most of the colours you have. This might just be the most cost-effective art supply out there because you can mix a whole range of colours and that palette could last years to come. Number 7, don't be afraid of overworking your paintings. And you're probably thinking like, what? How? But let me explain. If every time you create, you're not pushing yourself further each time, you're not unlocking your full potential. Don't be afraid of overworking your paintings because more often than not, you'll create something you love because of it. And by going just a little bit too far with the paint, losing the highlights, losing the midtones, creating something where you feel like you probably should have stopped just a little bit earlier, that teaches you for the future. You always hear people say, don't overwork your paintings. But if you never do, how do you know what that looks like? This painting here was a huge struggle because it's on different paper to what I'm used to. But we're just gonna make the most of it. The only way that you'll find out how much water and paint to have on that paper, see the signs and learn when to stop with the paintbrush, is by actually overworking pieces. You need to make bad paintings to move forward. Okay, time for number 8. Change up mediums. Watercolor is generally transparent, which makes it fantastic as a base, because virtually any medium will go on top. If something isn't going to plan, or you're struggling to define details, consider reaching for another art supply, especially color pencils, like they are your best friend. And even if mixed media isn't something you think you'd like to explore, you don't have to go that far. It's really just about taking the positives of each medium and making the most of it. If you like using watercolor but want to add really bright highlights, that's where another medium helps. Early on in the scene series, I only used watercolor, and you can see some of these later pieces have a lot more definition by adding the color pencil. But when it gets to those smaller faces, smaller details, this is really where color pencils come in handy. But also gel pens, neocolors, acrylics. There are so many different mediums that you can add. And sometimes it might just be metallic. Watercolor looks amazing with metallic. If you're looking for that extra something to really make it pop off the page. Pastels too, you can really reach for any medium. Especially if you find that there's one thing in particular you're really struggling with. Maybe it's adding detail in the finer areas. Maybe it's that you can't get the lines as harsh as you'd like. Maybe it's that you don't want to plan ahead and add those highlights. Or you like to work in the moment, which watercolor might not allow for. You do often need to plan ahead with that medium. There is always a workaround, and most of the time it'll be reaching for another medium. Like, look at the difference color pencils have made to this cow. But it doesn't have to just be another art supply. What about collage? I painted this in watercolor for Peachtober before, and in a crazy move decided to add a little bit of collage to the center of the eyes, and it really adds something special to this painting. Plus, it's one of the best sellers in my small business, so I think you guys liked it too. Make sure you experiment, stick with watercolor, and you will find your style. You'll figure out how you like to use it. It really is an amazing medium. I wish you all the best in your watercolor journey, and I hope these tips will help you. And if they have, why don't you like, subscribe, and I'll meet you back here in a few days' time. Bye bye.